Hi, Savvy. Hi, Ivy. Today, we're going to read a story about an animal that you see in your backyard messing around in your mama's garden. And I know you've seen it. I know you've seen other animals, but this particular animal you see quite a lot. They're bunny rabbits. And today, we're going to read a story about a particular bunny rabbit. His name was Peter Cottontail, and the name of the story is How Peter Cottontail Got His Name, written by Thornton W. Burgess, and the illustrations, which are absolutely gorgeous, are by Pauline Jackson. Now, kiddos, this book was written and put out back in the, in the 70s, early 70s. And it's one of the better books. Okay? Here we go. Peter Rabbit, Peter Rabbit. I don't see why Mother Nature ever gave me such a common-sounding name as that. Some folks say that a name doesn't mean anything, but it does. If I should do some wonderful things, nobody would ever think of it at all. Just because. Why? Just because it was done by Peter Rabbit. Look at him. He's just thinking and thinking. Peter was talking out loud. You know, sometimes Nana and Mama do that too. But he was talking to himself. He sat in the dear old briar patch with a scowl on his usually happy face. The sun was shining. The merry little beavers of Old Mother West Wind were dancing over the green meadows. The birds were singing, and happiness, the glad, joyous happiness of springtime, was everywhere except in Peter Rabbit's heart. See all the pretty birds? See the pretty birds and the beautiful sun shining and the birds are singing. But look at Peter. He's not happy. Well, let's find out what's going on with poor old Peter. Here we go. Well, what are you going to do about it? Asked a voice suddenly. It made Peter Rabbit jump and turn around quickly. There was Jimmy Skunk poking his head in at the opening of one of Peter's private little paths. He was grinning, and Peter knew by that grin that Jimmy had heard what he had said. Peter didn't know what to say. He hung his head in a very shamefaced way. Poor Peter, he was embarrassed because Mr. Skunk, Jimmy the skunk, heard him complaining to himself about his lack of a last name. Look at that skunk wearing some blue jeans. Is that an umbrella? He's holding an umbrella. Okay, let's see what next happens. Peter was embarrassed. You know how sometimes you get embarrassed when somebody catches you doing something silly or something? If you don't like your name, why don't you change it? Asked Jimmy. Peter sat up, and the frown left his face. I hadn't thought of that, he said slowly. Do you suppose I could, Jimmy Skunk? Easiest thing in the world, replied Jimmy Skunk. Just decide what name you like, then ask all your friends to call you by it. I believe I will, cried Peter Rabbit. Well, let me know what it is when you've decided, said Jimmy Skunk, as he started out for home. But when Peter Rabbit tried to think of a better one, he found no other name he could think of that really pleased him. The more he thought, the sadder he became. Poor old Peter, he's just got all kinds of problems, doesn't he? He's happy because he's thought of a solution, but he's sort of sad because he hasn't figured out what name he wants. Well, a name's a very important thing. That's not something you do quickly. Okay, let's see what else next goes on. Now, Jimmy Skunk was the only one to whom Peter had told how unhappy he was with his name. And it was Jimmy who had suggested that he change it. Jimmy thought it was a great joke. He thought it was funny. He passed the word along to all the little meadow and forest people that Peter Rabbit was going to change his name. Everybody laughed and chuckled over the thought of Peter Rabbit's foolishness, and they planned to have a great deal of fun with him as soon as he should tell them what his new name was. Now they were getting all ready to make fun of poor old Peter. See, Jimmy's telling the tale to all the friends that Peter Rabbit had. And they're all thinking it's a funny thing. But they may change their mind later. What do you think? Peter was sitting on the old briar patch one morning when old Mr. Buzzard passed, flying low and low. "Good morning, Brer Cottontail," said Massa Buzzard with a twinkle in his eye. At first, Peter didn't understand what old Mr. Buzzard said, but by the time he did, it was too late to reply. For old Mr. Buzzard was on his way up in the blue, blue sky. Mr. Buzzard just was being polite, wasn't he? Saying good morning to Peter and telling him how you doing. By the time Peter figured out what he was saying, he'd done flown away. That's come from being in a big old hurry, guys. Comes from being in a big old hurry. Okay, let's see what goes on next. Cottontail. Cottontail, said Peter over and over to himself, and he began to smile. Every time he said it, Cottontail, the better he liked it. Cottontail, Peter Cottontail. How much better sounding that is than Peter Rabbit. That sounds as if I really were somebody. Yes, sir, that's the very name I want. Now I must send word to all my friends that I am no longer Peter Rabbit. I am now Peter Cottontail. He's so happy he's come up with a name. Yay! He's dancing around. Look at him. And he's on his way to go tell all his friends what he's decided. Peter kicked up his heels in a funny way, as he always did when he was pleased. Suddenly he remembered that such a fine, long, high-toned sounding name as Peter Cottontail called for more fitting conduct. Need to be a gentleman. Yes. So he stopped kicking up his heels and began to practice fancy manners. You know, like holding your pinky up when you drink your tea. But first he called to the Merry Little Breezes and told them that in the future he would not answer to Peter Rabbit, but only to the name of Peter Cottontail. He was very grave and earnest and important as he explained to the Merry Little Breezes. There he is, standing there with his cane and standing all spiffy and polite and looking good, Peter. Looking good, my man. Okay. The Merry Little Breezes kept their faces straight while he was talking, but as soon as they had left him to carry his message, they burst out laughing. What a joke! And they giggled as they delivered the message to each of little forest and meadow people. Peter Rabbit's changed his name. In the future, without fail, you must call him, if you please, Mr. Peter Cottontail. Tee-hee-hee-hee. They're grinning and laughing and cutting up. Look at this. And all the people are listening to the Merry Little Breezes tell this news about Peter. Beautiful Fox and Mr. Deer. And there's Jimmy Skunk right there. And what do you call this little fella with the bandit mask on? The raccoon. And I don't know what that is. Oh, that's the bottom of Mr. Raccoon. And the little, I don't know what that is. Oh, mouse. That's a little mouse. And there's the beaver and the birds. And there's a fox back there in the background. And Nana's favorite, Mr. Owl. Hoo, hoo. They all were enjoying it. Okay, you ready? While they were all doing this, Peter was back in the old briar patch practicing his new manners. My screen went black. While they were doing this, Peter was back in the old briar patch practicing his new-fangled manners. He would have to try to look very high and mighty and important to match such a fine name as Peter Cottontail. So Peter decided he was going to change his name, and he's being all fancy with his manners. But you know what? That's not really being fancy. That's being well-mannered and polite. That's speaking kindly to others. That's keeping your mouth closed when you chew. And using your napkin instead of using your sleeve to wipe your mouth. And when you sneeze, instead of going, "Oh, shoot!" you go, "Achoo!" Cover your face. And after you get finished doing a job of cleaning up your room or working out in your little garden, going inside and washing your hands while you sing, "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Ivy and Savvy, happy birthday to you." Shake, shake, dry them off, and go back outside to play. Now, I want you girls to help Mama in the garden, because Mr. Peter Cottontail's a fine gentleman, but he will eat Mama's garden vegetables. So you help her keep an eye out for them, and help her put another string around the bottom of those sticks she's got, because the rabbits are little and the deers are tall. You going to help Mama do that? Okay. I love you, my girls. And remember, every Monday is what? Media Monday. And we're going to read a book. So you tell me if you've got a special book you would like Nana to read. I'll be glad to go get it, and I will find it. I'll go to the library or Amazon or wherever, and I will buy it, and I will read it to you. I love you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.